Morning, everyone, and thank you all for being here, and also thank you for having me here. I'm Sijie, and I'm from the Institute for the Humanities and the Social Sciences, and also as a population hub as our faculty. So today, I'm very happy to have this chance to share with you this ongoing project that I'm currently working on with Zhiwu, Zhan, and Kaixiang, and it's still a work in progress. So any comments, any suggestions are much appreciated. And this is a paper on the gender inequality in lifespan in historical China, mainly in the Ming and Qing dynasties. Okay, so first, please, just a very brief motivation here for to do this research. We know that the life expectancy has risen dramatically, especially in the past century. However, survival has never been distributed equally. The classic research tells us persistent mortality inequalities by both gender and socioeconomic status. And so although today women tend to outlive men, the survival advantage of women actually was not universal historically. So what we are trying to do in this paper is to address this puzzle. So specifically, we try to understand the question that under what social conditions can institutions reshape the biological advantages in survival. And we believe that the historical population actually could provide us a very revealing setting because in historical times that we human beings only had very limited medical and also public health technologies, development and interventions. And so we can have a cleaner observation or identification of how would social institutions actually reshape affect our lifespan. So what do we do in this paper? To our knowledge, we constructed the largest genealogical data set for historical China using an AI-based pipeline. In total, we have now finished our pilot run, so we have now constructed a sample that includes more than 3.6 million individuals from 6,429 lineages across 15 provinces in China proper. That equals about 1.8 million spousal pairs who were primarily born during 1350 to 1920. And we examine the gender differences in longevity in lifespan using just by comparing the husbands and wives' lifespans. And we show that the spousal lifespan gap actually is associated with especially fertility and gender social status and also their marital structures. So higher husband status widens the gap, higher wife status narrows it, and also greater fertility reduces the gap, the inequality between gender. Okay, so in terms of the previous literature, we believe that our paper mainly speaks to two big strands of literature here. First is, of course, on the empirical literature on gender differences in lifespan in both historical populations and in current populations. And for also that we are trying to provide more quantitative evidence on the common population and also especially the female population's lifespan in historical times. So for the previous studies on pre-modern lifespan, most of them focus on the male elite population. So we also try to provide more empirical quantitative evidence to this big literature here. Okay, so in terms of the data that we are using in this paper, as I've mentioned, that we are mainly use the primary source for our research is Chinese genealogies. So it's a very common and widespread practice in traditional China, especially in South China, the big families, lineages, and clans would compile their own genealogies to record the family members' information. And in theory, every male family member would have their own mini biography, their own own entry in the genealogical book. And we can find a lot of useful individual level information, including the man's name and also his birth order, his courtesy name, his pen name, and then the social status information, that if the man passed the national civil examination, the Keju exam, if he holds a degree or he holds an office at the state bureaucracy, and all this information will be recorded. and also the surname of his wife, and also if his father-in-law is a degree holder or office holder, we can also find the information here. The number of sons they had, the number of daughters they had, and also the daughters' marriages. And finally, most importantly, to this research, that we also have the birth and death dates being recorded for both husbands and wives, and also their age at death. So based on this very valuable information that we try to construct this Chinese genealogies database, it's still under construction. So we're still processing genealogies now, but it's basically a large-scale historical demographic database, and we try to digitize all the genealogies. In total, we have already collected 20,000 lineages genealogies by using the OCR and LLM-based extraction. So we have now finished our pilot run. So for the pilot run, we have processed 7,000 lineages genealogies. And here is our construction pipeline here. So because all the genealogies are compiled privately, so they all have different layouts and formats. So our first step is to do a layout analysis and to put labels on the pages and to separate different blocks on the page. And then we send all these labeled pages to the OCR model to get a raw text. And we also do some post-engineering work and to turn them into the semi-structured text, and finally put the semi-structured text into the large language model and to extract the information. And we for the pilot run, we use the DeepSeek V3 to extract the information. Okay, so in this specific paper that we use a sample, the sample here includes information from 6,429 lineages, and the reason some of the lineages are not included is because some of the lineages would not record the birth and death dates for wives, so we didn't include them in this specific research. So in total, there are 1.8 million spousal pairs, and most of them, here is the map showing us the spatial distribution of our current sample. So most of the lineages we have already processed are located along the Yangtze River. And that's also the area, basically the region that the compiling genealogies is the most widespread and also common practice in South and especially Southeast China. Yes, and then for the empirical part, the variables and the empirical strategies in this research, because we focus on the gendered survival difference here, and we mainly focus on two dimensions along two margins. And first is the extensive margin of survival, and we construct this binary variable outlife, and it equals 1 if the husband actually lives longer than the wife and 0 otherwise. So we want to use this binary factor first to capture whether a male survival advantage is achieved, is realized within the couple. And then along the intensive margin, focusing on the intensive margin of survival, we try to look at the size of the lifespan, the inequality. So we construct this spousal lifespan gap factor here. It is defined as the husband's lifespan minus the wife's lifespan. So we want to use this to capture the magnitude of the survival difference within each spousal pair. And this is the long-run trend, the 10-year moving average of spousal lifespan gap from 13 in the Ming and Qing China. So it's quite a few fluctuations here, but in general, the husbands would, in most periods, husbands outlive wives. And averagely speaking, the average lifespan for husbands in our sample is 57 years old, and for wives is 56 years old. So just the husbands outlive wives by about 1 year. And the range here, the fluctuations basically range around 0 to 2 years. But in the later periods here, especially after 1850, we find a quite abnormal, a slightly abnormal trend here. But it's mainly because that first is because that we have quite just a limited sample size after 1850. A lot of genealogies that we collected actually compiled. The last time they compiled is before 1850, so we had a fewer sample size after 1850. And also it's because of the Taiping Rebellion and other constant rebellions and conflicts and wars that we saw in late Qing period. So that's all lead to this little bit abnormal trend here. But before 1850, we think that our trend is more reliable here. Just it shows that husbands would always outlive wives. And for the key variables that we're focusing here in this paper, first is social status. We want to see if there's socioeconomic gradients actually in survival. So here we are using two very straightforward measures here. First, for husbands, we construct this binary factor, the social status it equals 1 if the husband actually holds a 科举 degree or official position. And for wife here, because it's hard to directly measure the women's social status in traditional China, so we mainly use the information of the wife's father. So if her father holds a degree or office, this variable would equal 1 for this type of wives. And also, but in some very rare cases, that the woman would also be granted a noblewoman title by the emperor, and it's usually because her husband had some very good performance in government, and then the emperor would also grant a nobleman title for the husband, for the official, and also a noblewoman title for his wife. So we also include this information here. And for the fertility outcomes, we use two measures. First is a categorical indicator that we divide all the households into 4 different types. That the household had only sons, only daughters, no children, or had both sons and children. And then we also use a continuous count of sons and daughters to measure the fertility outcomes. And for the other control variables, we include the age gap between spouses, the birth year difference between spouses, the marital structure, that's the number of marriages the husband had, and also for the wife, we had an indicator for whether the woman is actually a concubine or not. We also condition on a 20-year birth cohort fixed effect and lineage fixed effect. Okay, so in terms of the model, it's very straightforward. We estimate the linear probability model and also the OLS specification to examine the correlates of gender inequality here. So for the inequality, we just use outlive, whether the husband could outlive wife, and also lifespan gap here to measure the gender differences. Okay, so finally, our main results. First, on the extensive margin, just by using the outlive as a dependent variable, that we'll find several key patterns here. First is that female, the social status actually operates asymmetrically. Just we'll find that the social status of the husband, it would had a quite like just quantitatively speaking, not a strong positive effect here, but statistically speaking, still significant positive effect of increasing the probability the husbands outlive wives. But if the wife is also of high social status, if the wife's father held status, and if she actually got the noblewoman title, that will significantly correlate with a decrease in the probability that her husband outlive the wife here. And also the marriage expansion strongly favors men because usually if a man could have several marriages throughout his lifetime, it's mainly because the previous wife died, so that then he can remarry another wife, and so that's also shows us a selection into remarriages here that has a very strong positive coefficient here for the number of marriages. But for concubine, it's a little bit to our surprise that we first thought that being a concubine would means that having a lower social status, lower status within the family hierarchy. So maybe that would confer a survival disadvantage, but we didn't find that. That would still just being a concubine would not increase the probability for a man to outlive, for her husband to outlive the concubine. And finally, most importantly, for the children here, we use both the, I think I can, so here is the main table here. So in the column 2 here, we include the categorical variable for fertility. And in column 3 here, we use the continuous count for fertility. But we always find the negative coefficient here. The only exception is that if the family had only daughters, that compared to the family had no children at all, actually the families had only daughters would have a positive coefficient here, which means that the husbands were more likely to outlive the wives. But in general, just if we use the continuous counts for sons and daughters, we'll find that having more sons, having more daughters, actually would decrease the probability that the husbands outlive wives here. Okay, so then if we look at the intensive margin, just how large is the difference? And now we use the spousal lifespan gap here as our dependent variable. And it's basically a very consistent pattern with the previous results. Just we'll find that the social status, if a higher social status of the husband would actually widen the gap. But it basically means that because we also do separate regressions by using the husband's lifespan as a dependent variable and the wife's lifespan as a dependent variable, and then if the husband had a higher social status, that would very significantly increase the lifespan of the husband and also increase the lifespan of the wives, but not as strong as just increasing the husband's lifespan. So that basically shows so that's why that we can find a positive coefficient here. It just it increased both the husband's and wife's lifespan, but it's just a stronger effect for the husband's lifespan. But if the wife herself also held some high social status, that would significantly reduce the gap here. And also, if they had more children, actually that would shift the balance more, just to favor women. The survival advantage to women, basically. The having more sons and daughters would increase the husband's lifespan by about having one more additional son or one more additional daughter would increase the lifespan of the husband by 1 year, but increase the lifespan of wives by 2 years, so that they have a stronger positive effect on increasing the wife's lifespan. Yes, and we also do a robustness check here by looking at the remaining life of widows, but I guess I do not have enough time to show you the results. But basically, what we are trying to do here is to try to exclude the direct biological cause of childbearing on women's lifespan, so to have a cleaner identification of how would fertility affect the women's lifespan. And we find similar results, just having more sons would significantly increase the remaining lifespan for widows after they lost their husband. Yeah, so finally, to conclude that our paper shows that in pre-modern China, that the spousal lifespan gap fluctuated over time with husbands outliving wives in most periods, and demographic and social factors actually played a central role in shaping the gender gap. And that's all I'd like to share with you today. Thank you very much. Thank you.